Hello everyone, Alistair Gold here. Yes, I think Spurs managed to find a new low for the season, which was quite impressive, bearing in mind there's been a few pretty rubbish lows. And you know what? Just in case it wasn't bad enough last night, that performance, it was kind of reminiscent of the FA Cup match against Middlesbrough. It had that same vibe to it. A team that was a bit like, can't really be bothered tonight. I think just to make that even worse was I got out of the City Ground afterwards, which first time I've ever been to City Ground. It had that kind of old school vibe, that feeling of, history has happened here kind of thing. It's a world away from like the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium and newer builds like that, but it does have that kind of old school vibe. You can feel Brian, or you can kind of understand or envisage in your mind Brian Clough walking in and all this sort of stuff. But coming away from the stadium, walked to the car park, sat in my car, flipped on the sat nav to see, okay, it's 2 hours up here, wasn't a bad drive. What have I got on the way back? 3 hours because of road closures. You're going to get in at around 2 a.m. Nothing sucks as much as having had a really bad game to have to kind of report on, write on, and Tottenham playing utterly dismally, than also having to navigate your way through the country roads of a 3-hour trip back. And my goodness, I had some country roads. Wow. In the middle of the night. Yeah, it sucked. It absolutely sucked. And didn't help my mood when I kind of woke up this morning, had to do all my talking points and things like that. So yeah, where to dive into that mess of a match? Another chance of silverware gone for another season. It was so poor. And look, Spurs didn't even look to seize any initiative during the game. But I kind of felt Antonio Conte did afterwards. He tried to force the narrative. And you might say, I don't know if anyone has watched the press conference afterwards. It was quite interesting because it's in a little kind of very small press conference room, very warm room to begin with, which was nice because it was cold outside, but it did get quite warm. A little press conference room, and you are sat like right kind of. I was 3 feet from Antonio Conte. It was very, very kind of tightly little packed in room, and I kind of let me go take it back a step. Right, so Antonio Conte was not meant to do the press conference after the game. It was meant to be Christian Stellini. That was the plan. It had always been the plan. He was doing the pre-match one, which he did. It was quite interesting. We got about 20 minutes out of him. It was not very well attended, that one, the pre-match one. There were only 4 journalists. I think that was all there was of us. Essentially like a sit-down it became. I don't know whether it was a combination of it being the Carabao Cup and people knowing that Conte wasn't doing it. There was no national newspapers there whatsoever. So it was just the 4 of us kind of getting to a bit of a free-for-all, asking as much as we could, really. So we were under the impression that Christian Stellini was going to do it again. And that was very much the plan right up after the final whistle, I think it was. No, just before the final whistle, I think it was. Because just to set this in, because I know some people, when Stellini's done them in the past, have been like, sorry, not the suspended one, but was doing the one pre-match, have been like, oh, does Conte not care and all this sort of stuff. Essentially, the idea, the logic behind it was that in that competition, Carabao Cup, you don't actually have to do a pre-match press conference if you don't want to. I think Arsenal didn't even bother doing one before their game against Brighton. And then afterwards, you do actually have the option whether to do a post-match one or not. So I think Conte thought he'd done 20 press conferences, apparently. It was worked out as in 5 weeks, I think it was. So he thought, well, Stellini's done it all right in Marseille. Let's give him another shot and I can kind of just focus on the team. Yeah, I know what you're saying. I know what you're saying because I'm thinking exactly the same thing. I'm not entirely sure the focus must have been that great because of the performance. So yeah, it was meant to be Stellini talking after the game. But it was not. Antonio Conte walked in. I got word literally, because I have to do like a press conference blog and I have a headline. It was all like Stellini talks, blah, blah, blah. I was literally given a heads up about 5 minutes before he walked in. No, it's actually going to be Conte. I was like, oh my goodness. So I had to change kind of all of my thing. And then, yeah, Conte walked in. And like I said right at the start, before I went off in a different tangent, I felt that Conte wanted to force the narrative post-match. And I think because Harry Kane was involved, and Harry Kane was... The narrative was very much about tiredness and a lack of energy. And I think because there were a few national journos in the post-match, maybe not so much regulars as well, they kind of seized on that. That was fine. That's their audience. So it was almost like he was kind of getting away with it. And I just... You might hear my question at the end of it. It is a question of a man that probably has guessed already he's going to have a long trip home and is not buying the fact that this was about a lack of energy or tiredness, and essentially just asked the question... I'll say the question a little bit. Well, actually, all right. Essentially what the question was, I'll say it now, was that Spurs have failed to score in... I wasn't having any of it. I was like, Spurs have failed to score in the first half of their past 8 matches. That's ridiculous. In their past 5 domestic matches, so not including the European ones, they've gone 2-0 down. 5 matches in a row in domestic games, they've gone 2-0 down. So essentially, yeah, he'd said all this energy stuff, and I went, yeah, but there's all that, Antonio. And essentially, how do you fix that? That's clearly the issue. How do you turn that around? And I think he was a little bit like, oh man, I tried to change the narrative of this, and this annoying bloke that's there every week is driven up to Nottingham just to shove that in my face. So yeah, I mean, I want to give you the quotes that he said in his initial stuff and see whether you agree with it or not, because I didn't. He said, yeah, that was actually the other thing that surprised me, was that like all those fans, and I should stress, I was getting into the game for free. So, I can't whinge entirely about my evening, I'm getting paid to be there. Whereas those poor Spurs fans had actually made the trek up to Nottingham, paid out their own money, and then had to watch that utter garbage served up to them. I don't think any of them would have expected in the post-match interview for Antonio Conte to be thanking his players. And that, it just didn't sit right with me. It didn't. And that's why I think my question was a bit more, kind of to him. So this is his answer. Bearing in mind what we'd just been served up, a 2-0 defeat against the bottom team in the Premier League, who had made 9 changes, and Spurs had put out a pretty strong team. Barely registered many shots on goal at all in the game, Spurs. So, this was his answer. The performance, I have to be honest, I think maybe tonight the energy was really poor from us. Don't forget it was the 12th game in a really short period. The games we played in the past, every game was really, really difficult, and we lost a lot of mental energy in the Champions League and in the Premier League, physical energy. In our minds and hearts, we came with a desire to overcome the opposition, and for this reason, if you ask me if something was wrong about my players, I tell you not. Because I have only to say thanks to my players. They are really tired. I tried to manage the situation, for example, in midfield with Højbjerg in the first half and Bentancur in the second half, because they were really tired with the risk of injuries. The same with Harry Kane and with Harry. Until this morning, we waited to see if he could start or not, but in this situation, he was the only striker for us. For this reason, I can only say thanks for the availability they show me. In our hearts and minds was a desire to go ahead in the competition, but the difference was the energy. It was really different between us and Nottingham Forest. So yeah, that wasn't the answer to my question. That was the answer to the first question. I think someone, maybe Sky, I think it was a lady from Sky, asked just simply, what did you make of the performance, really? And yeah, I didn't like that. I didn't like all the hearts and minds and stuff. It sounded very political. It sounded very spin and I didn't... Look, I'll give him Kane. I absolutely think tiredness-wise, I get the Kane angle. The guy has played almost every minute going. And I appreciate the fact that Conte has not had the ability to rotate him. And that's because of Sonny being out, of course. Richarlison being out. Richarlison's probably the main one because he's more the direct replacement for Kane. And then you've got Kulusevski being out. You could actually even use him as a striker because of his frame if you needed to. And then on top of that, you've got Lucas Moura, who he's just been having this inflamed tendon problem right from the start of the season. And he wasn't even in the squad yesterday. He rocked up with the squad, but he was not available to play. Same with Ben Davies. I don't know whether that was injury related or just they thought it'd give him a rest from the team. I don't know, but he wasn't even on the bench. And Conte even said that apparently in a soft training session, in his words, on Tuesday, Kane actually had to stop himself and come out of the session because he just wanted to keep some energy for Wednesday. So look, I'll definitely give Conte that. I do think in Kane they have a player who he hasn't really been able to change much. It was quite interesting because some of the journos from that area were asking me, like, was there not some kids that they could have played and all that? And I understand, funnily enough, that Will Lancashire, the young striker, does he come from Sheffield United in the summer, who plays for the under-18s, a little bit for the development squad, has mostly, actually hasn't even played for the development squad, might have come off the bench. I know he's had a few minutes in the UEFA Youth League games. So highly rated, yes, and he's a big lad, but so he was training with the first team, I understand, this week, but it would have been just a ridiculous step to chuck him in there. Look, I know, you know what I'm like, young, talented players, I'm all for them getting a chance, but I'm also trying to be quite realistic about chucking someone in who's not even got near, like I say, barely any kind of under-21s experience. So throwing him in to that game, it just would have been too much. It would have been, especially also when you do have Richarlison back on the bench, who couldn't start because of fitness-wise, but you've got him on the bench. And the same with Kulusevski as well, and Brian Hill. So, yeah, the problem is obviously Dane Scarlett's away on loan. Troy Parrott's on. They're the ones probably you would say they're the young players that would have come in. Troy Parrott obviously injured at the moment. I am going to do a loan roundup at the end, by the way. Lots of people have been asking for that. So I will be doing that at the end of this. Sorry, I don't know. Yeah. So there wasn't really a Kane alternative. There wasn't. I'm absolutely going to give him that. However, when it comes to the rest of the team, I really don't know if I can get on board with the whole tired narrative. I just don't know if I can. And that's because Conte's kind of lack of desire to kind of rotate his squad much throughout this tough period of matches. That's my issue with it. It's like, I have no doubt some of those players are knackered, but that is because they've been overplayed. And this, we've said it every week, this kind of lack of trust that Conte has got in his fringe players, rotation options, whatever you want to call them. So I don't really buy that narrative. And for me, I'm going to look at this on paper, and this is with no disrespect to Nottingham Forest, because I thought they utterly deserved it on the night. I thought they played well. They looked good going forward. Could have had more goals were it not for Fraser Forster. But if I'm looking at that on paper, I'm sorry, but what was essentially Nottingham Forest's B team, because they made 9 changes from the Premier League game, Spurs' B team should be good enough to beat the bottom of the league's B team. I'm sorry, but it should. I know that's on paper, and I know Spurs have shown in the past that isn't always the case at all. So their B team should have beaten their B team, but Tottenham put out almost an A team, and there was no plan that came together from this A team. It just was naff. It was really, really naff. Like I say, Steve Cooper made 9 changes, whereas Spurs, the whole spine of the team really was the same Tottenham team that we've seen pretty much week in, week out. And I think Conte may turn and say, but I've put in some of these rotation options before and they haven't done the business for me. The problem for me is, have they had enough time to really build any rhythm? Because this is my issue with Conte's changes. I don't want to quote like they were changes. When he makes changes, the players are so rusty that they don't perform to the level you'd expect or hope for. They probably do perform to the levels you'd expect of someone being thrown in for the first time. Like even Fraser Forster. Fraser Forster I thought was excellent last night. I thought he was Spurs man of the match by a mile last night. However, the very first kind of big chance that Forest had, Davinson Sanchez tried to clear the ball. It kind of cannoned off a defender, went behind him, and Fraser Forster, and I'm guessing this is through match rustiness, just looked at the ball, it's going, okay, it's going to go, but oh my God, there's a post! And it was almost like a goalkeeper forgets where the frame of his goal is. because the ball was like bounce, 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 hit the post, and then fair play to Fraser Forster. He got suddenly switched back on, and I think it was Lingard had a header which he saved really well from the follow-up. But just in that moment, even like an experienced goalkeeper, what is he, 34 years old, something like that, had no idea where his own post was. And that is through a lack of game time. You know, this is he's making his debut in almost mid-November. But fair play to Fraser Forster. Honestly, there's not meant to be of any criticism to Fraser Forster, because he had about 2 one-on-one saves he made, various different saves as well. Honestly, if it wasn't for him, Spurs could have had a really, really embarrassing scoreline against, as I say, the league's bottom side. In front of him, again, Davinson Sanchez has come in, but I just feel like Davinson Sanchez has lost all of his confidence. You know, this guy, at the end of last season, deputising for Romero, was playing really well. Start of this season was playing pretty well. He was talking about racking up the clean sheets, because he was. Every time he was playing, Spurs weren't conceding. And I just wonder whether it's a morale thing, a psychological thing of just knowing that you're only going to play if someone else isn't. And even recently, they've been kind of shoving left-footers in there. You know, you've had Davies Longley coming in there and Dyer having to move across just so Conte didn't have to play Sanchez. And look, I know there's people that don't rate Davinson Sanchez, and on current form, I can understand why. You know, I was talking to John Veal in the press box yesterday from PA, and he was saying, it's hard to believe he was a club record signing once. But I can only stress, that first season after he signed, he was really good. He utterly showed why he was a club record signing. He was superb. But obviously, of course, he has not developed and progressed as you would hope. A player of the calibre that he was when he was, 21 when they signed him? But yeah, I think psychologically, if you're a guy, and I know that Davinson Sanchez has wanted to leave the club in previous transfer windows because he didn't feel, he was the regular first choice. And psychologically now, I think that's what happens. You see him chucked in. It's a little bit like, it was last season in the Conference League. There was very much a B team under Nuno. And some of the players were saying, I think it was even Ben Davies said, psychologically, you feel like you're a B team player. And I just wonder whether Davinson Sanchez is now in that mindset of, that's it. It's not going to change, is it? I'm never going to be a regular first choice player kind of thing. And yeah, his performance was shaky as anything. Renan Lodi, I'm pretty killing the pronunciation of his name. Honestly, breezed past him for the first goal like he wasn't even there, Sanchez. He just kind of showed him the ball, went, no, you haven't, and just went and curled. Lovely shot, lovely goal. But Davinson Sanchez, honestly, was on a different kind of planet at that point. But he wasn't alone. Eric Dyer, I just kind of feel like ever since Eric Dyer got back into the England squad, I feel like his form has just gone like... Obviously, got in the World Cup squad today, so I hope that doesn't mean he's going to be like the worst ever performance against Leeds, because I do feel like he's gone from looking like a much more organised, improved player to a player that, is meant to lead that back line and just isn't at all. And he's making rash decisions. He's running out, missing kind of things that he's trying to anticipate, and he's completely making a mess of them. Misjudged moments, caught on the ball. I mean, for Forest's second goal, he'd run up the pitch, doing like a mazy kind of dribble. And, the moment the ball got lost, it was Sessegnon. That's it. Dyer stuck up the pitch, and it left Basuma and Skip to try and defend. And you saw the result of that as centre-backs. It was just, Lingard just kind of wandered in from the right-hand side as if, this is lovely, and just kind of nodded the ball down to the pitch because no one was marking him or even making an attempt to. But, this is... And it's just irony, was it, Lingard? Because remember, you'd have heard me saying about a year back that Spurs did inquire about Lingard as a potential free transfer because of the homegrown angle, but it didn't end up happening. I think the idea from Lingard's camp was that he was likely to move abroad, and obviously ended up with Forest, which no one probably would have expected way back then. But I just wonder whether there could have just been more rotation. I look at someone like Japhet Tanganga. Japhet is just look, again, another one who's had some sticky moments, but ultimately has just never been trusted since. You can't tell me that there was games in the last month or two when Jaffic got back from his injury that he could not have come into the side. And given the likes of Dyer, I suppose, if you're pushing Longley inside, or Romero, a little bit of a rest at times, maybe Romero would be available for this period rather than playing through injury. That's exactly what happened to Romero. He was playing through injury and just made it worse and worse and worse. And now he's at this position where the club just had to kind of not play him anymore. There's this kind of... we're split, aren't we? In that, and I totally get this is the way football works, that let's say Spurs went out last night with 9 to 11 changes, whatever. We'd have all been saying today, oh my goodness, he just didn't take the competition seriously. And instead, he went out with a team that was pretty strong and still went out, and really embarrassingly. And yeah, I guess it's the way in other matches as well. So, say the likes of Tanganga had come in, or Sanchez. Would we, myself as journalists or the fans, complained about it? Oh, why is he playing that donkey or that person who's not very good? When actually it might have been the right thing to do, because the added rotation might have actually left the players a bit fresher, and you wouldn't have had some of the performances that we've seen in recent weeks. I don't know. But I don't know, it's just this lack of trust in the midfield. And I think it's similar in the squad, and I think it's similar in midfield. I mean, you look at last night, and he had to do like a job share agreement with Bentancur and Højbjerg. Højbjerg played the first 45, and Bentancur was going to come on for the second 45. It didn't work. The moment Bentancur went off, Højbjerg went off, they just lost all sense of order and discipline in the midfield. Honestly, Forest could just they could have scored 5 or 6. They really could have. And I don't think that, in a slightly different sense, I don't think his positioning of Bissouma and Skip has helped in any way. For some reason, and let's not forget, Conte a couple of weeks back, what was it, maybe a month and a half back, maybe 2 months, quite clearly and publicly came out and said Yves Bissouma has to improve his defending. So where does he then play Yves Bissouma? As a defensive midfielder. And what does he do with Oliver Skip, who is a defensive anchorman midfielder? And, whatever you think of him because of recent performances, within the game, Oliver Skip is seen as one of the brightest young kind of English talents in that anchorman role. So where's Conte playing the two of them? Bissouma as the back, as the anchorman, and Skip playing as almost like a right winger. And, shock horror, neither of them looked any good last night at all. I don't think that's any coincidence. I don't know why Skip is playing as an advanced midfielder, essentially. I remember watching him against Bournemouth while I was away and thinking, why is Oliver Skip on the right trying to ping crosses into the box? Look, Bentancur can play that role quite well because it kind of sits within his skill set. He can do it. But with Skippy, he is that anchor, and that's what he did at Norwich. He played it so well. He can be a box-to-box midfielder if you want, but ideally, his most natural thing is to screen in front of the back, or 3, 4, whatever it is. And I just kind of feel like if someone had said to Conte at some point in the game, why don't you switch him? Why don't you play Bissouma kind of running up and down and play Oliver Skip there? I don't know, maybe he feels that Oliver Skip has maybe technically got a little bit more about him to be able to put in crosses and stuff. I don't know. But I just find it bewildering. And so we've got this weird situation where Yves Bissouma, one of the best midfielders in the Premier League in recent seasons, looks completely last night essentially looked like a player that I don't want to go too hard on him because it was a mess of a game. He looked like a player who wasn't that Yves Bissouma, essentially, I guess. He wasn't the Yves Bissouma of recent seasons at all. And, especially after seeing quite a bit of promise about him, I felt, against Liverpool, this was like a shadow of the same player. And I feel like Skippy, Skips hasn't had a lot of chances since he got back from injury, so he's going to be rusty. And in playing him out of position, you're not going to see the best of him at all. And, and that leads to, social media. You've got the people going, oh, he's never going to make it. He's a Harry Winks, a Tom Carroll, or whatever. I love the fact they always try to look for a kind of an English academy, Spurs academy type, rather than all the foreign players who've utterly failed. Skippy, play him in his right position, and he will do very, very, very well for you. And he will develop and grow and improve as well. But yeah, play him out of position, and you kind of end up getting the chaos that we saw last night with all the players not really knowing what they were doing. That was the biggest takeaway from me, was that those players out on the pitch didn't look like they knew what they were meant to be doing, didn't look like they knew what the instructions were. And that's a failing on Conte and his coaching staff. It is. It really, really is. And then we look at the wing-backs. Matt Doherty came in, and I felt he really kind of fluffed his chance to really lay down his marker to start at the weekend. I felt he had one very good half-volleyed shot, which Hennessy did well to kind of parry away. Caught it really well, Doherty. But other than that, very little service of any kind into anyone. To be fair to him, there wasn't a lot of movement up front, but we'll come to them in a little bit. And he actually defensively had a really kind of bad moment, I felt, for the first goal it was. There was like a 50-50 ball to be had in the centre, midway through the Spurs half. I can't remember who the Forest player was. But essentially, Doherty didn't go in for it. He let the player just slide, take the ball, and because he was standing there in a bit of no man's land, the ball then got to Lodi, who then ran through into the space, easily beat Sanchez and curled in the goal. So yeah, not a good night, I felt, for Matt Doherty at all. For those who don't want Emerson Royale in the team, Doherty didn't do that cause any favours last night whatsoever. And then you had on the other side Ryan Sessegnon. And you know what my feelings on Ryan Sessegnon and the kind of potential I do feel he has if someone can unlock it properly. He was pants last night. He was very sloppy in his play. It was him kind of giving the ball away that led to the second goal. Very timid in the way he attacked, kind of picked up on that, didn't I, after the Liverpool game as well. The only thing I would give... Well, there's two sides to this. I was going to say, the only thing I would give Ryan Sessegnon on last night was that he absolutely kind of sacrificed himself for the team in the end, playing for about 26 minutes or so with almost one leg. He really did. So what happened, if you weren't aware? As Spurs were about to make their fifth and final sub, which was Djed Spence coming on for Matt Doherty, Ryan Sessegnon signalled over and tried to wave over and essentially say it looked like he was holding his hamstring, which is rubbish with his history, but he was. Really feel for him if that is the case. Whether he made that clear enough to everyone around to stop the substitution, I don't know. But he did make an effort to try and tell people that he was having an issue. Bench didn't see it. Spence came on for Doherty, and that left the really awkward scenarios. Everyone's looking back to the bench afterwards because Sessegnon is on the floor, unable to get up. So the physio has to go over to him and essentially probably tell him, look, you got to play on. Spurs with 11 men, they're struggling as it is. With 10 men, who knows what happens? So yeah, he had to play on. He was pretty much limping. I was watching Clement Longley would go over to him a few times, and you could see him kind of saying to him, like, just, I'll try not to give the ball too much to you. And essentially, I'm guessing that was what he was saying. I'll cover this area. You don't do too much. And there was a few moments where he kind of had to clear the ball. It was like, it looks so painful. And then honestly, final whistle, I did feel for him because he kind of collapsed to the turf, clearly injured. And then he got up and everyone else Spurs players had no interest. Other than Djed Spence saying hello to a few Forest teammates. The other Spurs players had no interest in staying on that pitch. They went straight down the tunnel. And it left poor old Ryan Sessegnon over the far side. He's kind of doing this awkward, limp barely being able to move across the pitch. There wasn't even any staff members went over and helped him or anything. And he just kind of, it was kind of painful to watch. And he just probably took him a good few minutes just to get across the pitch. And yeah, all alone, down the tunnel. Even because Conte did his press conference, and just as he was standing up and he was going out, I kind of went over and picked up my phone. I said to him, like, just to check, is Ryan Sessegnon okay? And he was very much like, oh, he's okay, yeah, tomorrow we'll make an assessment. But he didn't complain. And I saw afterwards his interview he did with Spurs playing. It was kind of similar. And I do wonder whether there's an aspect there of trying to, again, like change the narrative, almost like, yeah, it didn't seem to be anything wrong. This is why we didn't take him off, kind of thing. And then maybe later, maybe this press conference tomorrow, he'll say, oh, he could have told us he was injured. Oh, he's got a hamstring injury or something like that. I don't know whether that will be the case. And I think he was kind of trying to essentially make out it was like fatigue. It didn't look like fatigue. He was holding that hamstring quite a lot. Yeah, it's just a complete mess. And it was very much in keeping with an utter mess of a night, to be honest with you. But we had a bright spot. We did. Other than Fraser Forster, the only player I felt that really did himself any credit was Djed Spence. Shock horror. Djed Spence played well against Nottingham Forest in the match that we all thought he probably should have started. And that is the other aspect of squad rotation as well, is that there is no reason why last night Ryan Sessegnon had to play. You know, Matt Doherty could have played on the left and Djed Spence could have played on the right. There is no reason that couldn't have happened last night. And it did. It was just, you know what I've said before about maybe there's a worry now that if Djed Spence kind of comes on and plays well, it makes everyone look a little bit dafter. And I kind of felt that was what happened. It was a bit like, okay, he's come on for like 26 minutes or that. Yeah, if you look at Djed Spence's previous minutes, 89th minute, 89th minute, 89th minute. So that's all he's had, 3 Premier League games. So this time, 26 minutes, like a luxury. Probably felt he was on holiday. Probably felt like he had, 3 weeks to do stuff in compared. And you know what? He did. He used the time to show what might have happened down that right-hand side if Conte had trusted him for the whole game. Maybe what he could have done that right-hand side in previous matches as well. Look, I know Conte might say, if you really were to sit and he was going to be honest in a tactical thing, he might say, oh, but Forest were open at that point and there were tired legs or blah, blah, blah. Okay, so why haven't you done that in more other games then? That would have to be the answer to that. At least bring him on. Honestly, the first thing he did, right, his first real main thing he did, Djed Spence, was there was a header, a Forest header in the Spurs box. He collected it, stopped it going anywhere, sprinted out of the Spurs box, motored down the right-hand side. And then there was a moment for me during that run that is why I kind of feel he's something different to what Emerson Royale and Matt Doherty do. So Djed Spence looked up and you can kind of see him doing this as if to say, anyone want the ball? In that scenario, he kind of slowed slightly. In that scenario, Emerson Royale with no one to pass to would have stopped, would have turned, would have passed it back to maybe a midfielder or a centre-back or something, and all momentum would have been gone. The other thing he could have done, Matt Doherty would have maybe done similar. You can't imagine he would have used his pace to kind of burst forward or anything. Djed Spence did completely the opposite. Djed Spence looked around and said, okay, there's no one, but we need to get up this pitch. So he put through the gears again, flew up the pitch, cut inside, and the only way they could stop him was Mangala used that kind of his arm. It was like a half rugby tackle, half kind of block thing on him. And that was the only way they could bring him down. And that was the first yellow card for Mangala before he got his second one with the Richarlison challenge. So just in this moment, he just proved he had something different that the other right back or right wing backs couldn't bring. And look, the other side to a Conte wing back we know is being that auxiliary striker. And there was an example of that as well from Spence. So Clement Longley gets down the left, puts in a really lovely cross to the into the box. And Forest defence were not expecting. Djed Spence has made a terrific run, gets a great header on it, Powerful header. Hennessy has to fly over it and tip the ball over his crossbar. It showcased again everything that he brings. So there was pace to make the run. There was anticipation to make the run as well. Speed, sorry, I already said speed, haven't I? Strength to kind of get a powerful header in there. And also his height. He is tall. He's a big lad. And all of that contributed to the fact that kind of being there as an auxiliary striker as well in the box. It's so frustrating. It was almost as frustrating to watch as it was, yay, kind of thing. And you had the Forest fans. Forest fans were really good too. He came out a bit before the teams and he gave Steve Cooper a hug, went to the dugout and gave the Forest fans a bit of a applause as well. And they were applauding him throughout when he was warming up. They were down the touchline, they were applauding him. At the end of the game, they applauded him. The only thing he was getting was they were chanting at various points. What was it they were chanting? You used to play at a big club. That was it, because of his loan at Forest. For Spence, he's got Spurs supporters in his family as well. He's got a Spurs supporting family in there as well. But he had interest from the likes of Dortmund, Roma, Forest, of course, Newcastle, Brentford. And the fact that he still chose Spurs, despite clearly, I don't know what promises would have been made to him. I do wonder whether he had... Often signings will have a sit-down or a meeting with the manager. I do wonder whether that happened with Conte. Because I can't imagine Conte promising that he would play quickly or not. But I just wonder whether his conversations were more with Paratici. And Paratici was saying, oh yeah, I like you, we're going to get you into this team. Because I just wonder what Conte would have said to him. Because Conte is an honest chap. I don't think he would have sold it like with a lie or anything. I don't think he would have said, by the way, Djed, Emerson Royal, we're probably not going to let him go. We're going to keep him on. Matt Doherty will stick around. So yeah, you'll be third choice. So we might give you some 89th minute appearances at some point. I can't imagine that conversation took place like that. It may well, I don't know. I honestly, genuinely don't know whether Conte spoke to him ahead of it or not. But whatever was said, this is not the reality I'm sure that he thought. Because, let's be honest, he could be playing every week at Forest if he'd gone there. Newcastle obviously is Trippier there. That's a bit different. But, you look at someone like Dortmund and the way they do bring on these players and they trust in youth. And this is the problem with Conte. I'd say Sessegnon aside, it's very difficult to see where he's trusting in youth. And this is something that's been a little bit different to what Spurs have been used to. The Carabao Cup was a competition that we'd always expect to see younger players involved in. And it just wasn't the case at all last night. It really wasn't. Pape Matar was on the bench, but there was no chance he was coming on unless they were somehow 6-0 up, which clearly was far, far, far from what actually happened. And I just kind of knew the way it was going to go yesterday when I asked Delaney ahead of the game again about Djed Spence in his press conference. And he said a fair bit about him. It was quite complimentary about him. But, you can tell from this quote, right? We're happy with Djed. Really happy because he works hard, but he needs time and we need to take the right decision for him. Sometimes with young players, you have to be careful. If you hurry to use this type of player, you can create a problem for them. So when will be the right time, Djed Spence will play. That logic is sound for me if it's a really young player with very, very good players ahead of them and you understand that, okay, it's not their time. But when the two players ahead of them in the pecking order have really, really not given any strength to their own case, I don't get it. I don't get it at all. I really don't. And the problem is, in a way, I guess it's happened quite late before the break now, but this cameo, this kind of bright performance, is only going to increase the scrutiny if he's not involved in some way against Leeds at the weekend. And I've said this before, I do feel that Conte's got this little thing about him. I don't feel he always rewards players for positive performances. I don't think he always does. Personally for me, I would start Djed Spence on Saturday. I would. You'd think it could be any of them. Honestly, he may go back to Emerson. He may do. I don't know. It really could go either way, but it's just very frustrating. And I think the fact that there are one more match, before, well, essentially it's January transfer window, so there's no more minutes to give to Djed Spence to say, oh no, things will change. And I just worry that we might get to January transfer window and, it's decided, we'll let him go out on loan then for the second half of the season. I just think that would be a huge mistake, especially if it means that it's just Emerson and Doherty left. Otherwise, you're just going back to square one. You really are. For me, in the second half of the season, they should be using this winter break to come to keep on developing Djed Spence so that Djed Spence can really challenge in the second half of the season. If he ends up going out on loan, honestly, I feel it's a massive, massive failure in the whole transfer, the whole way he's been treated. I really do, because it makes no sense to me whatsoever. This is a guy who was, the Championship Team of the Year. He was one of the best players in the Championship, helped Forest get promoted. For me, last night was a game that he should have played in. I don't understand the logic why he didn't start. It was a game he should have started in. He's playing against a team he knows well. I don't understand it for me. Like I say, I get the idea of maybe giving Doherty some minutes to get sharper, but play him on the left. And yes, I know I'm saying exactly what I said the opposite of with Skip and Basuma, of playing players in their wrong positions. But Doherty can play that role. He knows how to play it. He's played it before. And I think the overall benefit would have been more because Spence would have got some proper game time under his belt. And who knows? Who knows how that first half could have gone? Just seeing one player with that bit of energy, breaking down the right-hand side and creating chances, because he would have created problems. It might have altered the whole course of the game. Who knows? But yeah. Surprises, Conte. Please, surprises, and just say, you know what? Fair play, Djed. Have a start. I'd love to see it, but I don't know. And they got up front. Harry Kane, he did look knackered. He wasn't moving a lot. He didn't have a single shot at goal. Touched the ball 20 times in his 58 minutes. And you just knew when they were like, was it 1-0 or 2-0 down? And they brought, I think it was 1. Yeah, it was 1-0 down. And they brought Kane off. And it was a bit like, okay. I guess maybe there was a deal. There was probably a thing he said, are you going to play an hour, whatever, I'm guessing. But the moment he came off, it was a bit like, okay. Although, to be fair, I did feel Richarlison was had more of an impact. I did feel that. I felt he certainly looked more dangerous than Kane did. He obviously had that bit more desire. Put the ball in the net, but it was offside, which unfortunately has been a little bit of a thing for him, hasn't it, in the domestic matches. And alongside Kane, even Perisic, he struggled. He had the worst pass success rate on the team, 53.3%, by a long way. So that meant only half of his passes actually reached a Tottenham player. And it's, I think that's where I come back to it again. It's like playing the 33-year-old again in so many matches, when in the past, his competition, we've seen so many young players get their chances. And you cannot tell me that last night, Spence, Bryan Hill could have started. If they're not going to be given a start in that game, a game like that against Forest, the bottom team in the Premier League, when have they ever got a hope of starting the match? It just sends the wrong message. It really does, because there is no other game when Bryan Hill, he came on late in the game, and I wouldn't say he was fantastic, but from the start, could he have made a bit of a difference? Could he have done something different with, if you are going to have Kane up there, maybe have Bryan Hill, have a front three, have Hill there or whatever, or Perisic, or maybe do a half and half thing with Kulusevski and maybe Richarlison. It's difficult because I don't know the amount of time that they felt. You'd think Kulusevski will be able to start. You'd hope he's now played half an hour in this game, similar in the last, you'd hope. But I don't get it. I don't understand the logic behind some of the decision making. And that's why I felt I just didn't buy the whole tired thing afterwards. Because it was a bit like, someone who comes into work the next day going, I feel awful. It's like, yeah, but you had a big night out and you've got a hangover. It kind of felt a little bit like that, almost like you're the architect of your own downfall. So yeah, I did put the question to Conte about the 8 matches without scoring the first half, the 5 domestic matches in a row of going 2-0 down. And he kind of, you could see his face a bit like, oh man, you've actually asked me that. And it's like, I don't know, he just almost went into this space of thinking like, we don't want to talk about negative things. It's like, yeah, we've just lost to the bottom team in the Premier League in a really poor fashion. Do we want to talk about negative stuff? And that was kind of how I felt his response was. This was his exact response. We see the situation in the last period many times. Maybe 7 games we were 1-0 down, and in some games 2-0 down. I think that can happen. In this moment, we have to stay and to find positive things, because if you go to negative things, I think on one side it's okay in the right moment, but this is not the right moment because the period is really, really tough and they are losing a lot of physical and mental energy. They are losing a lot of things to be stronger with my players. I prefer to analyse negative and positive situations, but I think it's better to underline the positive things in this moment. Now our target is to recover well, be focused on Saturday and show to be strong. On Saturday also, our fans have to play a really good part in the game. They have to push us from the start until the end, because if we get a win and 3 points, it means that we finish a really tough period with an important qualification in the Champions League and a good position in the table. I think this could be good for us. I've got to admit, when he was saying that, I was kind of wincing. I was like, you've just put the fans through that and now you're asking them to cheer you on and support you in the next game. Look, hopefully they will anyway, but still, personally, I'd have been apologising to those fans that made that journey and saying, honestly, I know you've had it a bit tough in that game. Please stick with us and give us the impetus in the next game, because there are some tired legs and we need you guys. That's the way I would have said it. But there was no... I kind of feel that that's been a thing this season under Conte. This is almost like, and this isn't just him, I'm talking about players as well, this kind of no apology thing. And this is not to dig out certain players. I think I'll probably blanket this across everyone. But even last night, a terrible game. On social media, whether it's them or their social media people doing it, I don't think I saw anyone come out and just say, oh, sorry, that was rubbish. And well, apologies to you guys for that. That was really poor. Instead, the likes of, I'm only using an example because of the squad news today, but Harry Kane and Eric Dyer, unless I missed something, their first social media post was about being in the England squad and yay, World Cup and all that. And it's a bit like, what about those Spurs fans? What about what they were put through last night? And I'm trying to think, I don't think anyone put anything across social media. And maybe that does. Maybe it comes down from the top, because I don't think I've heard Conte apologise after a match. I don't think so. Might have been once, possibly. There's a vague bell ringing after one game and I can't think what it was. But I don't know. We all look at things differently, and I just wonder why that hasn't been a thing. Because I do think, look, it's not going to curry everyone's favour. Not everyone's going to be sold by that, but it is going to just have that little bit of a connection to say, we get it. We get why you're annoyed, and we're sorry, but we'll do better. And there's been none of that, and I think maybe that leads to this little bit of a disconnect, and that leads to boos at half time and things like that. But look, last night showed again that if he's not going to pick the player, if he doesn't trust the other players, then of course they are in need of surgery in January. They really are, as in not injury surgery, but transfer surgery. They are. And I guess there will be a big fear that if this continues, this way that they're playing, this inconsistent way of playing, that they're going to very quickly drop out of the top 4 after the break ends. And that will scare the powers that be, of course. They'll want to get the Champions League money and all that sort of stuff as well. Look, it may well have been that they were going to spend anyway in January, but you'd think this kind of drop that seems to be happening, they have to. They don't. Again, huge failure it would be. It really, really would be. They've got to back him with some signing he wants. Because look, let's be honest, that he's not going to suddenly get sacked or anything like that. I've seen people saying all this, like Conte out and things like that. Not many people, I must admit, but some. And, obviously you have to look at it, and Tottenham are fourth in the league, and they are through to the next round of the Champions League, having topped the group. So, yeah, you're not going to sack a manager at that point unless, you're probably a club used to far, far more success, and there is a huge divide in the dressing room, which there doesn't seem to be any case that is what's happening. That expression, like, the breaks come at a good time, and we often talk about it being half-time. I do wonder now whether the breaks come at a good time for Spurs in terms of this big old World Cup break, because I think they can regather. I think they can look at stuff. Maybe it will break this rhythm of performances. They can make new additions. Players that clearly are just either not going to play or are not good enough for a Conte team are going to hopefully be moved on if they can. Maybe it has come at a good time. Look, if you want to squint and look for any positive in this, maybe some people will say, well, they now don't have to come back that little bit earlier into matches after the World Cup because the Carabao Cup next round was just before that. So it gets a little bit longer to work with the team. And obviously the fixture schedule will be slightly less cluttered. I don't subscribe to that. I should stress 100%, I don't subscribe to that. For me, it's purely another competition they can't win. And that's what probably annoys me the most about it, is especially, I think it was, was it 8 Premier League teams have gone out of it? It's a competition that Spurs could have gone far in had they actually shown up and wanted to do that, or appeared like they wanted to do that. So yeah, there's nothing to celebrate. There's no like, yay, here's a silver lining to that cloud. There's not. I remember, obviously, they said last year with the Conference League was maybe slightly different because I don't think Spurs ever really took it seriously, unfortunately. But this is different. This is a trophy. It's the last trophy Spurs won, the League Cup. So, yeah. So, there you go. Conte's called on the fans to back the team, and I get that, but he has to, and the fans have to give them something in return. Do you know, honestly, something as simple as starting Djed Spence. And I hate to keep banging on the Djed Spence thing, but even just starting him on Saturday, the buzz among the crowd would be different. They'd have more patience for him. They really would. The atmosphere would change. It's just a simple little thing that I think would change the whole atmosphere there. You'd hope Kulusevski will start as well. Kulusevski and Djed Spence, there's a lot of it. That's an exciting potential partnership down the right. That could be fantastic. Richarlison may be fit enough to start, perhaps. That would be, you'd be able to change that front three. You could have Kane, Richarlison, Kulusevski up there. That would be a different. I don't think, have we seen? Oh, maybe when Sonny in the Leicester game, was that the front three? I can't remember now. I think it must have been. But just make some little changes, because I think the Spurs really have to sign off now on a positive. And that maybe slightly tweaks the way everyone looks at it. If they can finish in a good fashion, then they can the ball can start rolling into the next set of fixtures after. Whereas if they go in with this kind of negative end to it, it just has this little cloud over everything in month and a half ahead. So please, let's not fear what's to come. Please make it so that it's a positive thing we can look forward to. Please, Tottenham, please. Before I head off, quick loan roundup for you. A lot of injuries, I'm afraid. A lot of injuries to report on. Destiny Udogie, he's missed out in the last couple of Serie A games because he's got a flexor muscle injury. I think it's hopefully just a small thing and he won't miss many. Obviously, it'll be the last game for them this weekend before the break as well. They're actually playing Tongi's Napoli side. A tough game as well. So they have him back. They'll probably want him back for that, but whether he can or not, I don't know. But he's missed the last two. Obviously, played pretty well this season when he has played. Definitely progressing. Sergio Reguilon, great news for him. He finally returned to a football pitch. He's had a groin problem since April, so a long, long time. He'd been on the bench for Atletico for the past 3 games, 2 in La Liga, 1 in Champions League, unused. And then finally, the other day, against Mallorca, 1-0 defeat though, came off for the last 21 minutes. And he said on Instagram, "I feel like a footballer again after 7 months. 7 months. Pissed off by the defeat and the situation of the team, but excited about my debut with Atletico and wanting to help the team." Now, Instagram, when you hit translate, said a very different word for what he was about the result. If you don't like your swear words, don't look at it. So yeah, at least it's good for him to be back. This weekend they've got the Copa del Rey. There's a team called Almazan they're playing. And that'll be the last game. You'd think he'll get more minutes before that as well from that. So yeah, good news for Reguilon. He's back and getting some game time. Harry Winks, unfortunately, the other way. Harry Winks still hasn't played yet this season. He's got an ankle problem, left ankle. But what they have done now is they've decided to have surgery. And apparently he says it's gone well. This is what he put up the other day in case you missed it. Poor old Sampdoria have had a... Poor old Winks, but poor old Sampdoria. They've essentially loaned a player. They probably thought, oh, Premier League player, he's going to be terrific. And he hasn't played a single game. I think he's had 1 training session. He said, "Absolutely gutted it's come to this. I came here with the hope to give my all to this club. However, after trying everything to return to playing, a persistent problem I had since the summer has resulted in surgery. I'm positive the procedure went well, and all my focus is on returning as soon as possible to help the team. Thanks for all the support." I mean, I think I said before, there's been some reports in Italy that maybe they would try to cut the loan deal short. I don't know whether they can renegotiate now because of the surgery or not. I'm not entirely sure when he's going to be back. But yes, it has not worked for Harry Winks. It has not worked at all thus far. Joao Lo Celso, another one for the injury list. Looks like reports in Argentina saying he's ruled out the World Cup, which obviously is rubbish for him. Hamstring injury, picked up against Athletic Bilbao. Last month, scans revealed he'd torn his hamstring, and apparently, Argentinian reports are now saying that he needs surgery, so he's going to miss the World Cup. I think Spanish reports said he'd tried all different things, specialists, gone to different parts of the world as well, or spoken with people in different parts of the world to try and find some other less invasive way, I guess, of treating it. Just hasn't worked. So Lo Celso you won't be seeing in the World Cup. Joe Rodon, he will be heading to the World Cup. Wales obviously named him in their team, and obviously he's got to get through the game at the weekend. The Rennes are playing Toulouse this weekend. They won't want to lose. So bad. He actually has missed the last 4 matches, Joe Rodon. He missed 2 through suspension after a red card he got as a last man kind of tackle. Then spent the next one on the bench unused, and he's had the flu last weekend. So he missed their last game against Lille. But yeah, so he's got 1 game before he heads off to Wales, with Wales to Qatar. Tanguy Ndombele, he's been getting lots of minutes. Tonguy's kind of been going under the radar a little bit. And bearing in mind Napoli are top of that Premier League, top of the Serie A by a lot. I think they're 8 points clear. Tonguy's been getting a lot of game time. Started again on Tuesday night. They played Empoli, beat them 2-0. He started in that game, got 65 minutes. Played 26 minutes from the bench in the 2-1 win at Atalanta on Friday as well. So he's proven to be quite an important part of that team. You know, he's kind of seems to be starting bench, but he's a player that they're relying on, and you know, it's top of the table team. So who knows where that goes? You know, might be that they do look to try and take him on permanently at the end of it. Like I say, playing Udinese this weekend. So if Udogie was to get fit, I don't know why I said it's wise. If he is fit, then you might see a Tanguy versus Destiny. You could say it was written in the Destiny. Written in Destiny doesn't even make any sense. It would have been Destiny, written in the stars. Any other way I could have said that. So yeah, good stuff for Tanguy. Troy Parrott, obviously, he's currently out. His hamstring injury, he needed surgery last month. Really unfortunate. Scored his first championship goal for Preston, a winning goal as well for Preston as they beat Norwich, and injured himself in the celebration. It's just rubbish luck. So he's expected to be back after the World Cup. Dane Scarlett, a bit of a weird situation with Dane Scarlett this week. So even I turned on the telly to watch Portsmouth playing in the FA Cup at Hereford, thinking, okay, going to watch a bit of Dane, fantastic, see how he's doing. And he wasn't in the squad. So it turns out that Spurs did not give Portsmouth permission to play him in the FA Cup. On the face of it, you look at that, it's not unusual, said Tom Jones, but often it's because, let's say, I don't know, Spurs as a contingency maybe think, oh, just in case we need to bring Dane back in January, he could play in the FA Cup for us in the third round or something. Or maybe we loan him to somewhere else and he can play for them in the FA Cup. But as with Tottenham, that doesn't seem to be the case at all, because Danny Cowley, the Portsmouth boss, said after the game, he said to BBC Radio Solent, Tottenham has said to us that they will allow him to play in the next round if we got through. That's a communication we've had with them, and we're hopeful that we might have him for the next one. It's absolutely prerogative of the parent club to make that decision, so we totally respect that. I don't respect it. I don't get it. If you've said to them he can play in the second round, then why can't he play in the first round? I don't understand where that's thinking. Because the second round is only... who is it? I've written it down there somewhere. Playing against MK Dons this month. So it's not that the second round is going to be at a later date that's, fits in with the original logic of maybe he comes back in January or whatever. It just makes no sense. I don't understand it. It's such a Tottenham thing to do. Now, you can't play him. I'll go on then in the next round. It just makes no sense whatsoever. There must be a logic, but no one at Tottenham has thus far told me what that logic is. So, I don't know. And then finally, Alfie Whiteman, of the 9 players out on loan. He hasn't been playing the last few matches. Since he got a concussion, he hasn't really got back into the team. He's been on the bench since then. But he has played his part this season in once again keeping Degerfors in the Swedish, I'm going to say this right, Allsvenskan League, up. Because that's 2 successive years he's gone there, and they've stayed up like with kind of last gasp heroics for the team. So, so they've kept up. It's been interesting to see what happens with Alfie Whiteman now. He will obviously return this month. His contract, I think, is in its last 6 months now at Spurs. So 24 years old now. You'd imagine it will be time for him to move on. Whether Spurs extend the contract to be able to loan him and sell him, I don't know. But you'd imagine whatever it will be that he then plays for someone else. So, we'll see what happens with Alfie. So that's the loan roundup. Lots of stuff going on. Lots of injuries. It was nice to talk about things happening away from Tottenham, even if some of them were a bit weird. But there you go. So, press conference tomorrow. Antonio Conte is doing it. Unless he changes his mind at the last minute. I don't think he can with the Premier League. So he's got his press conference tomorrow afternoon. And then we have Leeds on Saturday. Obviously, Leeds are kind of a team that are capable of doing anything. They can pull off some surprising results. They can be dreadful as well. So Tottenham are going to have to be on the ball. These tired players are presumably still going to be tired because it's only, Thursday, Friday, 2 rest days in between. So I don't know how that changes. So maybe you put in someone who's a bit French? Not so much French. Someone who's a bit fresh, like Djed Spence. Well, no, just saying. I don't know. I've kind of given up kind of anticipating what's going to happen. I knew the Spurs team was going to be quite strong tomorrow night, the day before. I think I was 1 out in my predicted team. And, logic again would suggest that he will revert to type and it will be Emerson or Doherty down that right-hand side. But, give the Spurs fans just something to cling on to. He's got to find a team that's got some energy, because otherwise they're going to put in a similarly knackered performance and it's not going to look good at all. And then let's get to this break and start picking the bones out of what needs to change about Tottenham for the second half of the season, which is going to be fun. Going to be some interesting videos during that time. We'll see. Right, going to head off now. As always, stay healthy, stay safe, look after yourselves, and I shall catch you later. Goodbye.